You're listening to Real Mysteries, Episode 3, We Got Him. Real Mysteries is brought to you in part by Roadrunner Press.
The worst act of domestic terrorism by a U.S. citizen ever carried out on American soil in the history of the United States happened in Oklahoma City on April 19, 1995.
The fire department in the basement of the federal building. There's a children's center, and we need to get some fire department officials up here as quick as we can.
Adam 38, are you on the north side of the federal building with people buried?
I'm on the east side of the federal building. It's collapsed.
It's been almost 20 years since April 19, 1995, and yet even today, many unknowns and unanswered questions remain about the tragic Murrah building bombing that happened in Oklahoma City, of all places. Why Oklahoma City? Why this target? And why this date? We'll be discussing the issues of security, how to make our world a safer place to live, how those protective measures affect our individual civil liberties, which have been so sacred over the years for all Americans. Hopefully by the end of this series, we'll be able to answer this question. How can we help keep this type of act of terrorism from ever happening again? I'm Brenda Bennett, and this is Real Mysteries. The blast was felt 30 miles away from downtown Oklahoma City. But the desire to come to the aid of our fallen and wounded was felt across the whole country as sentiment poured in and rescue and response teams immediately mobilized and rushed the resources to the site. Bob Ricks, special agent in charge at the FBI.
Oklahoma City PD had already cordoned off the area, and I was escorted to the front face of the building, and literally half of the building was gone. I was met up with the chief of police, Sam Gonzalez, and the chief of the fire department, Gary Mars. We sat and discussed common plans for the future, what we should do. And both indicated that it appeared to obviously be an act of terrorism and that the FBI would have lead jurisdiction over the investigation. And they indicated they'd give whatever support they could, and they wished me good luck.
As we have heard, there was much speculation as to what caused the explosion, but the FBI and other agencies were at work looking for hard evidence, sifting for any possible clues.
And of course, I pledged full support to the rescue effort that was ongoing, and told the chief of the fire department, Mr. Mars, that we would not in any way impede in those rescue efforts and would be able to gather evidence around whatever rescue efforts were necessary, but the saving of human life was the utmost paramount issue that we had confronting us at that particular moment. We kind of went our own separate ways. Literally, as I recall, as we were separating, going back and forming our own task forces, was that I said a little prayer in front of the building and basically, said that it was hard to fathom, what had happened, and just asked for guidance and direction so that justice would be done in the carrying out of this undertaking we were about to do. My assistant agent in charge brought something that I had not thought of, and he said, Bob, do you know what day is today? I said, what do you mean? And he said, it's April 19th, which coincided with the last day of the assault on the Waco compound, which ended up disastrously. So immediately it was suspect that probably this would have something to do with Waco in some form or another.
The first big break happened on the morning of April 19th. A rear axle from a large truck was found about a block from the Murrah building. Investigators used a vehicle identification number stamped on the axle to trace it to a truck registered to Ryder Rental Incorporated in Miami, Florida. Ryder then determined the truck was assigned to Elliott's Body Shop in Junction City, Kansas, and was currently rented. FBI agents were immediately sent to Junction City to secure the rental documents and conduct interviews. The 20-foot Yellow Rider truck had been rented for 4 days to a Robert Kling, using an address in Omaha, Nebraska. Kling had shown a South Dakota driver's license when he picked up the truck on Monday afternoon, April 17th. It had an expiration date of April 19th, 1996, and a date of birth of April 19th, 1970. Tom Kessinger was a mechanic taking a snack break in the office when the truck was being rented on April 17th, around 4 p.m. He remembered 2 men being present, and his detailed descriptions produced the sketches of John Doe number 1 and John Doe number 2.
FBI agents took drawings to businesses around Elliott's body shop. As author Kent Frady's notes in his book, Oklahoma's Most Notorious Cases, the agents, quote, hit pay dirt at the Dreamland Motel, unquote.
The motel owner recognized the sketch of John Doe number 1 and remembered him driving an old yellow Mercury and asking if it was okay to park the Yellow Rider truck there overnight. He had registered as Tim McVeigh of Decker, Michigan. Bob Ricks.
We had put out an off-net search through the FBI's computer systems, which basically looks throughout the entire country for every contact that law enforcement has had with anyone by the name of Timothy McVeigh. And then that morning, when I came in, to my surprise, I was told by Special Agent Walt Lamar that Timothy McVeigh had just been arrested up in Perry, Oklahoma, and was currently being housed in Perry, Oklahoma.
Here is Oklahoma Highway Patrol Trooper Charlie Hanger.
I was traveling north in the left-hand lane of Interstate 35, conducting just what I thought to be a routine traffic stop. I had observed that McVeigh's car did not have a tag displayed on the rear bumper where it should have been. And so I began another routine traffic stop. At that point in my career, I'd made thousands of traffic stops. And I initiated my emergency lights, and he acknowledged those lights, began slowing down, pulling over to the shoulder.
Could it be that the man responsible for the Oklahoma City bombing was pulled over about 80 minutes after and about 80 miles north of the blast for driving without a license tag? Hanger had been with the Oklahoma Highway Patrol for 19 years. He instinctively proceeded with caution when he noticed McVeigh exiting his car. Hanger asked to see his driver's license.
While I was talking to him and while he was retrieving his billfold from his right rear pocket, the jacket he was wearing, which was partially zipped up, tightened up on his left side, and I saw a bulge under his left arm that looked to me like it could be a weapon. And so it was after I had asked him to unzip his jacket and slowly pull it back that he looked at me and he said, "I have a weapon." You know, he never indicated that it was loaded, but as soon as I saw that bulge, I had to assume that it was.
Hanger took McVeigh's loaded gun and searched him. What did he find?
Another magazine for that weapon he was carrying, knife, and a badge that he had on his person, which was a burned security badge.
McVeigh was disarmed, handcuffed, and put in the patrol car by Trooper Hanger. Here is Real Mysteries producer Jeremy Gossett.
Sheriff Hanger, tell us about what time it was that you made that stop and the arrest happened in Perry.
That was around 10:17 in the morning, about an hour and 15 minutes after he had blown up the building.
How was Timothy McVeigh's demeanor and his behavior when you told him that he was going to be placed under arrest?
His demeanor was always calm. He complied with everything I asked him to do. I did handcuff him behind the back, normal procedure, and placed him in my patrol car after he was arrested there along the side of the road. He acted like it was no big deal. I mean, he was very calm considering the circumstances.
Tell me a little bit about your thought process that was going on at that time. Were you thinking at that time that this could possibly be the man that might be responsible for Oklahoma City's bombing?
At that time, I made no connection between what had happened in Oklahoma City and the stop that I was on. There was nothing to me that indicated that he had committed this heinous crime. He was just an individual that had violated the traffic law, not having a tag, and for whatever reason was carrying a loaded firearm on his person, which is very unusual. I'd been a state trooper over 18 years at that time, and very few people had I ever encountered carrying a weapon on their person. I found them in motor vehicles, but very few on someone's person.
Now here's an interesting sidebar. Tim McVeigh was wearing a T-shirt with the words Sic Semper Tyrannis, which is Latin for death unto tyrants, and also the phrase screamed by John Wilkes Booth when he assassinated President Abraham Lincoln in 1865. On the back of his shirt were words by Thomas Jefferson uttered 2 centuries ago in describing the tyranny of the British. It reads, "The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants." McVeigh was carrying a driver's license from Michigan, his real driver's license. Hanger called in McVeigh's information to the Oklahoma Highway Patrol dispatcher for a computer background check. There were no previous arrests or warrants. The Glock handgun McVeigh was carrying was also called in to check the serial number. There was no history of it being stolen.
He looked like a clean-cut guy. He was a young man with a military-style haircut. He was clean clothes. He didn't appear to be, what someone might associate with a criminal look. He wasn't colored up with tattoos, and he was polite and respectful to me at that time.
So tell us a little bit about the rest of that day. What happened after you took McVeigh into custody?
After bringing Tim McVeigh to the Noble County Jail and booking him into the jail, I finished my paperwork, which was confiscated property report on the items I had seized from him. On completing all of that paperwork and securing that evidence, I went about my day and got off at 3 o'clock and was preparing to take 3 days off.
So without knowing it, the investigation had a break in Hanger's arrest of McVeigh. McVeigh was sitting in jail as rescue efforts continued in Oklahoma City, and the criminal investigation was just beginning. As noted by lawyer and author Kent Frates, in spite of the proximity to the bombing in Oklahoma City, McVeigh was initially treated as anyone arrested for minor violations of the law might be. He was kept in the Noble County Jail pending an appearance before a judge, which would normally have taken place within a few days and routinely led to his release on the posting of a nominal bond, perhaps even on his personal agreement to appear for a future hearing. Bob Ricks, special agent in charge at the FBI.
I immediately got a helicopter from the National Guard out of Will Rogers, and we flew a team of FBI agents and others up to Perry, because at this time the word we were receiving was that he was about ready to be released out on bail. So we were going up there. We obviously had called the local sheriff and told him that we were en route and that please, hold him till we arrived. So we knew this was going to be a key component in the solution of this particular bombing case. Not knowing all the circumstances of what Timothy McVeigh's involvement was, but we knew that he was going to be a linchpin that was going to hold this investigation together.
Bob Ricks, a former FBI agent during the siege in Waco in 1993 and former head of the Oklahoma Highway Patrol, noted the possible connection of April 19th, but the initial thought was Middle Eastern terrorists linked to the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center in New York City were also responsible for the Oklahoma City bombing. Here's a critical statement made by McVeigh when he was confronted by FBI agents at the Noble County Jail when they asked McVeigh if he knew why they were there. "It's probably about that Oklahoma City thing," McVeigh said. At that point, McVeigh clammed up and demanded a lawyer. So how did McVeigh wind up at the Noble County Jail? About a week before, Timothy McVeigh purchased a yellow 1977 Mercury Grand Marquis for $250. On April 16, 1995, Easter Sunday, McVeigh drove the 1977 vehicle to Oklahoma City, followed by his friend Terry Nichols. McVeigh parked the car a few blocks away. He located the vehicle behind other buildings in an area that would block the force of the blast. Then he removed the Arizona license tag and placed a note on the windshield. It read, "Not abandoned, please do not tow, will move by April 23rd. In parentheses, he wrote, "Needs battery cable." We don't know why McVeigh didn't believe the car would be towed or why he removed the tag, but evidence supports that he told one friend, Michael Fortier, that he didn't expect to survive the bombing, figuring he would be killed by the blast or in a shootout with law enforcement. As noted by lawyer and author Kent Frates, McVeigh, after setting the fuses in the truck bomb, simply jogged away. He drove out of Oklahoma City and headed north on Interstate 35. Bob Ricks, special agent in charge at the FBI.
Now, at this particular point, we didn't know for sure Timothy McVeigh was the one who drove the truck to the Murrah building, but we did know that Timothy McVeigh was the person who had rented the truck. And whether he had helped prepare the explosives, had delivered the explosives, what his actual involvement was, we had not yet determined. But we had enough probable cause to go forward with a warrant for the arrest of Timothy McVeigh.
Sheriff Hanger, once it was announced through law enforcement that Tim McVeigh was a suspect, how did you feel at that point?
Well, I was overwhelmed, to say the least. And, I began trying to recount my steps and what I had saw and heard that day to see if there was anything that I missed that I should have picked up on. And, somewhat disbelief in thinking that an individual that I'd arrested 2 days earlier is now named the suspect in the bombing. And, you would have thought, I would have thought, by looking into someone's eyes, you could maybe tell that they had committed such a terrible act. However, I didn't see anything in his eyes that made me think that or feel suspicious in any manner. And it's kind of scary to me to think that an individual could commit that type of atrocious act and you not see something in their eyes.
So, looking back a little bit, pondering the last 20 years, do you ever wonder that if you hadn't caught Timothy McVeigh and you hadn't pulled him over that day, where we would be now?
Well, I'm confident that had he not been stopped that day, that the FBI and other federal, state, and local authorities would have been looking for him, and I think there would have been a wide net cast looking for him, and he would have been located. I don't think he would have been able to escape capture very long.
Well, it's interesting to look back on, isn't it, that what seemed like another day ended up with you being almost a hero as a sheriff in this case.
Well, what I did was not heroic at all. What I did was what officers do all over our great state and our United States each and every day. I believe there was a lot of divine intervention that day that placed me at the right spot at the right time and kept me safe while I was performing my duties. And I did what any other law enforcement officer would have done, and just taking care of routine business.
Are there any other aspects of this day or this event, this happening with the arrest or of the whole Oklahoma City bombing in general, would you like to reflect on, or anything we haven't covered?
Well, I think it goes to show that law enforcement officers out on the road conducting traffic stops, their responsibilities and their duties carry beyond that traffic stop many times. I mean, there's many times you read where an officer stopped someone for a minor traffic violation and found that there's criminal activity going on, and the officer was able to interdict that activity, stop it, arrest the person that's committing that criminal act, all out of a traffic stop. And so the traffic officer out there today has a very important job, a very dangerous job, because he never knows who he's encountering, just like I didn't know who I was encountering that day.
After 20 years since this has happened, how do you reflect now?
Well, my heart and prayers go out to the victims and the loved ones that had lost loved ones during that tragic event, and that my thoughts go to them at this upcoming 20th anniversary. And I think as a society, we've become more vigilant in what's going on around us, that we're more aware of our surroundings. And I always encourage people when I'm talking to groups to report things that look suspicious to them, to call their local law enforcement. If something just doesn't look right or doesn't seem right, that they need to call that in, because there's not enough law enforcement officers out there to see and hear everything that's going on. So we desperately need the cooperation of the public to point things out to us where they see something that just doesn't look right.
Well, thank you, Sheriff Hanger, so much. Your service to our state is greatly appreciated. Thanks for joining us on Real Mysteries.
Thank you. Have a good day.
On April 21st, 1995, 2 days after the worst domestic terrorism incident in the history of the United States, it appeared the FBI had their man. But were others involved?
And what about John Doe number 2?
We'll get into that next week. For now, I'm Brenda Bennett, and this is RealMysteries.us.